Hi everyone, and welcome to the IMCSB podcast from me, Miriam Scarpa, and today Lydia will be hosted with me.
Hi, I'm the Work-Life Balance Coordinator at the Institute, and I have been looking into some of the great aspects within the Institute, but also some of the work-life balance challenges we are facing, and developed some of the initiatives around it. And I'm really looking forward to have a chat with the early career researchers and PhDs today.
Awesome. Yeah, so today is the second episode of the short series dedicated to work-life balance, and the first one of this series was just released, and I'll pop the link down there. And it was the first episode where me and Giovanni had the chat with Lydia, in fact. So if you're curious, just go and have a listen. And today we'll be having a chat with PhD students and early career researchers, so early postdoc in our institute. So Sarah, Nini, Will, and Arvin, would you guys like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Will. I'm a postdoc in plant science in Institute. And I did my PhD here as well, so I'm my undergraduate and my master's. So I've been in Glasgow for a while. It's interesting to see how things go.
All right, hi, I'm Arvin from Grenada. I am a third-year PhD student, and I also did my master's in Glasgow. So I did it master's, went back home, and then came back for a PhD because I like Glasgow weather so much. So I'm supervised by Professor Neil Bleed and Cheryl Woodhedge, and I work in molecular and cellular biology, looking at protein folding and secretion in mammalian cells.
So, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of Glasgow in the Institute of MCSB. And yeah, I'm actually from Germany, but I've been in Glasgow for 9 years now because I also did my undergrad here. So quite a long time.
Hi, I'm Nini. I'm also a PhD student here. I'm in my second year. I'm from Nigeria, and I did my master's here in Glasgow, and I came back for my PhD. So I've been here for 3 years. My PhD focuses on protein kinases in malaria.
Thank you so much, guys. Really great to have you on board. So a previous Athena Swan survey, as well as my informal conversations with staff and students, has suggested that it's really difficult to maintain work-life balance at the Institute, and I suppose in academia in general. What's your experience of that, and would you broadly agree with those findings?
Yeah, I mean, the academia in general is that's just a culture that's kind of accepted, and it seems to be the culture that works for most people. So yeah, I kind of broadly agree with what you're saying. I think it's kind of a hard thing to change, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try and change it.
Why would you think it's hard to change?
I mean, at the end of the day, it seems to be working. People publish papers and all that, and science goes on. And I think it's harder to change something that's sort of working than it is to completely change it. Because, the best way for change to happen is the change has got to be less painful than actually just staying the same. And I think that's a kind of a situation we're in at the moment. We just need to try and figure out how to make that change less harmful or big or whatever.
I agree, and I think it seems to be the generally accepted culture in academia. But I think in the end, it kind of comes down to personal decision, because it is, yes, there is the need to get your work done and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's you to make that decision. So you kind of have to balance off the forces between being productive and then still having a proper life, because your life has to be more than what just the lab, and your life has to be balanced. So I think you kind of have to make that conscious decision on your own to try and maintain that balance.
Yeah, so I totally agree with the fact that it's the culture that we come into. Like, you just come into it and then you just have to do it. First day at orientation, you have so many speakers, and the one thing they all say is try to have a life outside your PhD. So it's like before you even start, they're already trying to tell you that it's just going to be work, work, work. And sometimes you have to take a step back and remind yourself that you have a life outside PhD, and it can be quite hard if you want to meet up with everyone around you. You want to be as productive as everyone around you, and it can stress you out a little bit at times. But yes, we definitely need to change it, and I think it starts here.
I agree with everything that has been said. I think, like also Arvin said, that it's kind of depends on you, but also depends on the culture in the lab in general. And I think there's a lot of factors that kind of influence on how you're going to tackle it anyway. But for example, for me, when my chronic condition acted up, it wasn't really a choice that I had to be more strict with work. It was more like, you have to do it. So I think in some circumstances, it's not really a choice. But I think since then I've been better at having a work-life balance, even when I was doing better, just because it kind of taught me how to do it. So yeah, I think it is very difficult and a hard thing to do. And probably even from one week to the next, it's not going to be the same. So yeah, we just all have to do our best to be nice to ourselves.
It's really true. Also, I guess when health doesn't come in your way, anyways, it's probably not healthy to have all work and not life balance. And I have one of the question I have actually, just so maybe the listeners can relate as well. What do you mean with life? So what is the thing that you think is the most life outside of work? So for example, for me would be trying to find time for dancing or going for a hike or just spend time with my friends. What is that for you?
For me, it is running. I'm a long distance runner, and I'm always kind of training. So that's also, I guess I kind of hate myself a little bit because it's a lot of work and stuff like that. But that's for me. And football's kind of my life. So just them two. So if I can get them into my day, they're the things I get into my week. If I can watch some football, talk about it, and go for a run, that's me. Like what I need just to compress and just spend some time alone with myself.
Okay, so for me, that would be spending time with family, friends, playing basketball, which I really haven't been able to do in quite a long time, and playing music. So yeah, I'm a musician, and that's one of my passions, probably my greatest passion outside of science. So I always have to make time for that. Yeah.
What do you play?
So I play the saxophone and I play piano. I'm
Super talented.
Musician. Yeah.
My life outside the lab is still work. I run a wig store out of Nigeria and the UK. So that can be quite daunting at times, managing employees like 3,000 miles away and then, balancing care. Sometimes you're talking to customers, you're talking to the employees. It can be, that's my life outside PhD. And the other thing that I would love to really get back to is drawing. Last time I sketched anything, it's like 2016, 2017. I started my master's and that was the end of it. It was like, and I would really like to get back to that. I still have everything that I need, but I keep trying to pick it back up. And I tried the last time I took time off and I just never got around to it. So that's my life outside.
Yeah, so for me, I think one of the big things is spending time with my family. So I just got back from maternity about 1.5 months ago, kind of spending time with my wife and my baby. Also, hopefully, again, when things are better, again, to kind of travel to see family. But in the meantime, kind of seeing friends when that's possible. Actually, today, for the first time in like 1.5 years, probably I'm going to go try to play some football. We'll see how that goes, if I can come to the lab tomorrow. But yeah, non-contact, it's fine. And apart from that, I really like to go to concerts and gigs, but again, that's not really possible at the moment. So I do definitely feel like Corona is making it harder to have that balance, just because you spend so much time at home and can't really go anywhere else, or you can't go hiking or travel. So I think it's definitely limiting, but I think, again, you just have to try what you can do. So I just listen to music on my headphones.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to hear more about what people are doing beyond academia, because it just gives you such a broader picture of the person. I know COVID has obviously really changed the way we're working, but also what we're doing in our free time. I guess what would be interesting would be to find out what you guys think the barriers are to having a good work-life balance, how academia might contribute to making that particularly challenging in your experience.
I think one of the major things that you have to deal with is the unspoken expectations from your supervisory team. So, and kind of living up to that. So there is that need, and there is that requirement to be productive. And I think within the realm of the PhD, you do have a little bit of space to decide exactly how you're doing that. But as time progresses and things go on, I think so we kind of look at ourselves and measure ourselves against the people around us. I think sometimes we are being productive and we're not really realizing that. And then there is the expectation from a supervisor to produce results and to produce good results. And I think sometimes maybe that kind of pushes us beyond what would be regular or normal working hours. So in order to fulfill the expectations that are there, then we force ourselves, we work on the weekends, etc. And then in certain cases with people, life happens. So for instance, in my case, I had a recent change in my circumstances, which does not allow me to go into the lab during the day. So I'm home most of the day and then I work in the night. And basically for me, what it is that I really want to get this done. So I'm in my third year heading towards the end of my PhD. With all the challenges that COVID has brought with it, that has already delayed me. And I'm really trying to make sure that I don't get too far down the line. And so then for me, those sort of things kind of just it's like there's the unspoken the supervisory push, let me put it that way, and sometimes it's not necessarily verbal, but sometimes it's felt, if you get what I mean. So it's just the air, and I think it's that expectation that is there. And then there's the challenges of just life. Life just throws things at you sometimes, and you have to learn to adjust to deal with it.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. I mean, I'm in a large group and the expectation and the ambition in that group is really, really high. My PhD focuses on an area that has not been explored. So that's even more daunting for me because I'm being supervised by an expert in GPCR, but my project is on malaria. So my supervisor, yes, he's quite knowledgeable, he's good, but in the area that I'm working in, being the first person to literally work on this, it's yes, and to also produce good data, good results, like positive results. That's what everybody wants to see. In as much as you're being told that negative results is results, or if it doesn't work, if your experiment doesn't work, it's also something you still want to see it work. So yes, that expectation, the ambition, it definitely adds to it. Definitely.
So I'm in the same group as Nili, so I definitely agree on that I also kind of feel like because it's such a big group that it maybe adds more pressure because there's more people that you can compare yourself to. In a way, like for me, for example, now I have about 1.5 years of funding left, but at part-time or a bit less. So I know I kind of have a certain amount of time that I want to spend in the lab, and I have a lot of experiments I want to do, and it should be doable. It's science, it's research, so you never know when things are going to work out or not. So yeah, I think it's one of the stress factors is definitely that it's quite strict time-wise, how much time you have for your PhD, and then the expectations of what you get out results-wise in that time is quite high. I think it is the system definitely as well.
But I agree with you, Sarah, about when you said comparing other people. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I always, when I was doing my PhD, I was like, there's another student and he's did the project before you and he's got X number of papers, and you're like, and then you just automatically compare yourself to them. Like a successful PhD student is someone else, and you're always kind of looking for that. And yeah, so it's not ideal. And when I actually got my PhD, when I got the wee letter in, and I was like, I'm obviously pretty good at what I'm doing. I'm not an idiot. Then, I was lucky enough to continue my work as a postdoc in the same lab. And because I've kind of got that monkey off my back, I'm just like, all right, okay, I don't care as much. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. So my work-life balance is better now that I'm a postdoc. Because once you get the PhD, you're like, okay, brilliant. I'm good at what I'm doing. Then that kind of for me, that spurred me on, and I was like, I can just do it. And I probably work a little bit less than I do now because I think the pressure's off. And hopefully that's what other postdocs feel.
I feel like this is what I feel like the difference between the PhD and postdoc. The PhD might be more isolating and more kind of independent, while the postdoc is more you are employed by your supervisor. Do you think that's something that could help or kind of more refine what you need to do?
Actually, the fact that I have a contract and it says 35 hours, I'm like, I'm a bit more, well, this is it. It's written in stone. There's none of this ambiguity or grey area. The PhD, it's like, yeah, just do the work. It's like however long it takes or how little it takes, whatever. Whereas like postdoc, I'm like, okay, I've got this. This is what I do. And if I want to do any extra, it's because I want to do it, not because I have any pressure to do it. I like the system in France where I think PhDs are classified as staff. And that means they actually probably treat it more like a job, whereas here we probably treat it more like an internship or apprenticeship, which what it is, but at the same time, it's not got the protection of a job.
I know, I feel like this actually came up more and more recently, because to kind of separate us from even like key workers that we go to the labs or that we need to do our work in the lab. So from like, now we're more like PhD researchers compared to PhD students. But it's definitely nice how like they're considered completely staff, and it makes so much more sense.
Yeah, I don't like the term PhD student. When I was a PhD student, I was like, so like when my email, I didn't put PhD student, I put doctoral researcher, because I was like, well, you know, just want that kind of professionalism. You just want to feel like you're a member of staff and not a student.
So I definitely would also agree with you, Miriam, that during COVID, there was a bit, in general, I think, like it suits uni to treat you as students, they will treat you as students, and when it's better to have you as staff, like during Corona, they will treat you as staff. So I think it feels a bit like we're just pushed into whatever category is better for the employer, basically. But for example, testing is not really that widely available at uni, or vaccinations, for example. But yeah, I would definitely also feel that even though when I did get my PhD contract that I had to sign at the beginning, it did say 37.5 hours, but I don't think anyone really cared. And I think I only started looking at it properly when I went down to part-time, and I was like, okay, I work 60%, so I'm 24 hours. And now I write down every day how many hours I worked, and I try to kind of stick to around 24 hours a week. But again, I think it's just something I'm trying to be super strict about, just because I need to be.
You get 8 weeks off as a PhD student. I don't think there's anybody that's actually ever taken 8 weeks off. I literally had to remind myself last year when I was going home for Christmas, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do 3 weeks. And I felt so guilty. And I was like, no, do I really want to do that? That's a whole month, or close to a month. And then I was like, no, I have 8 weeks and I'm not taking any week. And then, yeah.
So for me, I worked previously as a teacher, and my vacation time has always been scheduled for me. So I know when it's coming up to summer, I know I have this amount of time vacation. When it's Christmas, I know that vacation is there. So it took a bit of an adjustment for me to actually decide when I'm going to take time off. And I think probably within my first year, I probably only took like 2 or 3 weeks off. But lately I've been working on that. So I've decided now, so I'm getting the hang of it. And so I've decided now that I'm going to schedule every 2 months, I'm going to take at least 1 week off. And I have been following that so far. I think the 8 weeks is well, in my case, it's sufficient. It's sufficient for me. I don't have an issue with that. But it's just, I think, because it's not scheduling, sometimes people just work and forget to take the time off. And what happened is that sometimes, because it's not scheduled, you just only really take it when you deem it absolutely necessary. When you've worked yourself to the bone and can't work anymore, then you say, oh, I should probably take some time off. But so I think I would advise the PhD students who are working and who are incoming to consciously decide how you're going to schedule your breaks, how you're going to take your breaks, how often you're going to take your breaks. Discuss that with your supervisor, and I think it should be fine.
Thank you, Arvin. And I think this sort of discussion we are having around taking breaks and hours, the 8 weeks PhD students entitled to, and picking up on Will as well, relates very much to reflecting on how people want to work and can work most effectively. And I think taking that space and opportunity to relate how much you feel you have the confidence to do that, and how much sort of safety you feel to request what you are entitled to. And I think and particularly at an early career stage, early PhD stage, people often feel very strongly like they are the imposter here and they're not belonging here and they have to prove themselves, which I think makes it harder for people to really, first of all, reflect, but then also stand up for the sort of rights entitlement, but also, I suppose, breaks they need. Does anyone have any sort of comments or experiences on that, or has that changed for anyone during their PhDs or during your postdoc?
I mean, again, I feel like I keep saying similar things, but for me, it was definitely a process, and that I feel a lot more comfortable working the hours I'm supposed to, and also to kind of take the holidays I can. But I think it was definitely different at the beginning. But again, it was also because I was able to work more, so I didn't really feel the need to take as much holidays or time out. And yeah, imposter syndrome, definitely, I think a lot of people have it. I have it. Sometimes I feel it more strongly than other times, but I think it really depends on, for example, if I'm doing new things in the lab, I'm like, oh, everyone can do it. I'm not good enough to be here, or not smart enough, or when other people publish papers, I'm like, nothing that I'm doing is good enough, or yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's really difficult, especially when coming back to what we said earlier about comparing yourself to other people in the lab. And of course, you might be on a lab with loads of postdocs and you just feel so belittled, but not in a bad way by them. It just happens and you just feel you don't know anything, or what you know is really little. And also if you are surrounded by other PhD students and even working at the same pace or whatever, everyone's got a different project as well. So maybe 1 year works very well for me, but maybe it's a whole year of optimization for someone else. And then so it just feels like there's this huge gap, and it's really difficult to distinguish imposter syndrome from, just realize that's just imposter syndrome most of the time.
Imposter syndrome is real, and for me, I experience it a lot. And I think it's something that you just have to deal with throughout your life. Because I mean, I get it even with things that I would have done before. For instance, I must admit this, probably I shouldn't say this, but I don't like to write. When I do write, it's fine, it's good. But to get into the process of writing, it takes a while for me, and every time I need to write, I have to overcome imposter syndrome in order to complete that piece of writing. So for me, it's something that you'll have to deal with over and over during your PhD. Might be the same task, might be different tasks, but it's just a part of life, I guess.
Would we say that imposter syndrome is basically just no confidence?
Because I think so.
Yeah, I think it's fine you can be like, I'm not very confident at this and that. And I think you can give yourself time to experience it. But it's I think when you have it all the time, I think that's the problem. I think for me, during my PhD, I was you just compare yourself to everyone around you, and then you this person's working really hard, working herself to the bone. Something like there was a postdoc from UCL. She did her PhD in UCL, and it was just a different level of intensity. And I was just kind of plodding along, and I was oh, I'm just comparing myself to her. But I think when I figured out that kind of just everyone's in the same boat, it made me feel better. I was okay, so it's not just me. And then when you talk to PIs or fellows, they feel the exact same. And you're wait a minute, I'm trying to get to your stage. I'd love to get to that stage, and you still feel like that. I think that's the one thing we all share. Well, it's nice to know everyone goes through the same thing.
I'm attached to a postdoc that had previous work experience with malaria. So he worked in a lab for so long before going to do his master's and then his PhD. So he's grounded in things that are not necessarily related to the project, but he has that amount of knowledge. And sometimes when he starts to talk, I'm oh, okay, I haven't read that. And he's and then sometimes when I come with something that I've read, and he's oh, I didn't know that. I'm oh, wow, okay, that's good to know. It's good to know that you actually don't know some things. So yeah, if the people around you once in a while, that's something that people would not really do, just admit to the fact that they don't know. But people go around they know it all, especially in science. It's It's a crime to not know. So I think that has to be one of like the major challenges around that, and that's why people might feel that way. And then for me as an international student, English is not my first language, so writing back home is much more different from writing here. And I started experiencing that from my master's, where they gave me corrections and like, oh, this is how it's done here. So situations like that, you feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. But then it was a classmate of mine, and he's like, you were good enough to actually get into the program. So why would you think that you're not good enough now that you're in the program? And I think those are the things, that is what I say to myself sometimes. I mean, I got in here, I can't be that dumb. If I'm here, I definitely. So yeah, that's how I do, but I think it happens to everybody.
Worth highlighting that sharing these experiences is one of the most helpful things we can all do, because everyone feels like it. And I think at least knowing that it is imposter, it's not a reflection of who you are, is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you guys feel like you might have suboptimal work-life balance? Do you feel like you want to change that, or you're happy with how you're right now?
I think I'm happy with where I am right now. So, yeah. So like I said, so I'm home most of the day, and so I get into the lab maybe say around 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening and finish around 9, 10 sometimes. So I'm happy with that. I think my concern is not necessarily the balance, but how much I can get done within that time. So because of that, I try sometimes to work on the weekends, but same thing now. So that roughly is equivalent to 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
So for me, I think partially probably because I work part-time, I think I have kind of quite a good work-life balance. But also, I think especially at the moment, maybe it's just not having worked for a while and kind of starting back not too long ago. I do feel like I'm very anxious about work and really stressed. So even when I'm not working, I kind of think about the things that I have to do and trying to plan the next year of my life of how to do experiments. And obviously nothing like that is going to work out the way I plan it to. But it's still kind of going around in my head. So I feel like sometimes even when I'm not at work, I stress about it a lot. So yeah, it's kind of still affecting me outside of my working hours, and even lying awake at night being like, oh, so what do I need to do tomorrow morning? But again, I think that's probably similar for a lot of people.
I mean, I think everybody wants vacation 6 months, twice a year. But one thing I've come to realize about myself is no matter how much time I have in the day, like, or how much time I have to do something, I was still stressed. So I just have this in my head that I should just do the best to be productive. If I need just 2 hours to be productive, then it's hard. It's really hard for me to actually stick to that, to practice what I'm preaching. But I preach it to myself every day. I don't practice it all the time. I'm guilty of that. But yes, suboptimal, definitely. Definitely. But I also just know that it's more about being productive. It's not about how many hours I put in. It's about what I can get out. So,
which you sometimes can't actually influence.
Which sometimes I have to accept that I just can't. Although I don't. Yeah.
I think my work-life balance, you have to actively think about it sometimes. Like I'm really lucky where my boss is, we got on really well on like a personal level, so we can just chat. And he's in the lab. He's decided that he wants to do lab work now. So I'm like kind of teaching him how to do stuff. So I can have a quite close relationship with him. We have lunch together when, pre-COVID and all that. And when he is in the lab as well, we're like, oh, do you want to come down for lunch? So I'm kind of lucky that I've got someone who's I can be quite open with. And I remember, I think it was last year, I told him I was working flat out. I was like, oh, I'm trying to get this work done. I think everyone feels that, like, you're like, okay, this project's almost finished. And if I just absolutely lever it and I can get it all done and then can have like a peaceful, like, time afterwards, but it never really works out like that. And what ended up happening was I levered it and then I just burnt out. And I remember sending an email to him and I was like, I can't work. And he's like, just take a couple of weeks off. And I think that's happened a couple of times, like also during my PhD, where I just overwork and I kind of snap, and then I'd be like, it's kind of pressure on me. It's not, don't think that pressure is coming from him. Yeah, I have moments where, or periods of time where I'm fine and I'm good. At the moment, I work, Monday to Friday, and I don't live in Glasgow. I live outside. So if I want to put an overnight on Sunday, I have to really justify it to myself. Most of the time, I'm just like, nah, I just won't bother. So I'm kind of good with separating out work like that. But part of it is because I'm physically not near work. I think that's a big factor. Like, if say you move to Glasgow or a new city or whatnot to do a PhD or work as a postdoc, then and you just go to work, and you're that close to work that you just go in anyway. It kind of has this gravity to it and get drawn in. Whereas I think if you're further away and can get drawn in, I'm pretty sure some people have done it where they're like, you're going for like a wee walk in Botanic Gardens, lovely day, and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go into the lab briefly, and it's like there's no reason to go into the lab, but somehow you just do it out of habit, and that means that even when you're off, you kind of just, when you walk into that door, when you scan your card in, your brain activates into work mode, and then you're like, you can activate it quite easily to turn it on, but can't turn it off. It's got a long lag phase. So I think that's kind of one of the things. I think if you live close to work, it's a problem I've noticed.
I think that brings up, Sarah and I had during a podcast before, and then we did talk about this, how it's kind of hard to switch off the work brain or switch off the life brain or whatever, and the way around. And that is true, that adding this kind of logistical distance, you can, because I am 10 minutes away, so sometimes it could be like, oh, I could pop in and just start something or set up something, and that feels like nothing, but actually it's still kind of skewing this like work-life balance. And then also I want to comment on, I think I'm similar to you, Will, and then I do burn out as well. So I always make like a big, very optimistic plan, and then everything is really, really scheduled to the minute, and I tend to kind of work and fit everything in. So sometimes I feel like I have work-life balance because I do fit in like very non-PhD stuff in between, but then I do burn out after maybe, I don't know how long, but I do feel I just need to kind of switch off completely. And that's something that's been really hard during COVID, because I've always been quite kind of good at timing it, and I have my burnout ends with my holidays, so I would just go home, and you have this logistical distance, and I don't have my laptop, and I don't see anyone from work. So it's worked that way, but it's not been working for the past year or two. I don't have like an escape route either. Just want to say that.
Yeah, I think in that sense, COVID made it difficult for PhD students and researchers in general. But I think one of the things that's important is that you need to know yourself firstly. So when you're getting to the stage of burnout, there's a lot of signs that would probably come up before you actually get to the stage of burnout, and you kind of need to learn to recognize what those are and act on it as quickly as possible. And the other thing is, maybe you need to treat yourself like you would want to treat somebody else. Because if you see someone tired and burnt out, you would advise them to take a rest, but yet you would continue to not take a rest when you're burnt out. So you kind of need to be kind to yourself also. So know yourself, be kind to yourself.
Thank you, Alvin. I think we're almost discussing what are some of the systems you put in place to help you have a better work-life balance. I was wondering if Nini or Sarah had any sort of suggestions as well.
I think I'd totally go with what Aaron said. You have to be kind to yourself. And I think he already has a system in place where he knows that every 2 months he has to take a week off. So I think putting things like that in place would help. Because my first year, I didn't think of that. I never even thought of the fact that taking a break was a thing. I was just coming in and doing weekends as well. So I think putting things like that in place will go a long way to really help you. And I think we should all just try to do that.
I agree. I think I try to talk to myself more try to talk to myself more like I would to a friend. So when I feel a certain way, I think it's very easy for me to be like, oh, but you just work a bit more, or you should just do it anyway, which is something I would never say to someone else. And I think in some instances it's quite helpful to also just talk to my partner, just because then she she can do that for me in a way. So I'm still trying to be better at it myself, but it's sometimes good to kind of have someone else to bounce it off and be like, just look at yourself. You need a break and you need to do it now. Because I tend to say, oh, I'm not doing so well. Maybe I should take a break in 3 weeks and then just still work a lot until then. But I think that's just not how it works. So actually, I'm going to go to an Airbnb this weekend and spend some time by myself. But I think just last weekend was not good. So I think it was like a bit of a cliff. So I'm trying to kind of gently go back so then I can feel better again, but probably also actually be more productive when I'm not completely at the edge. So yeah.
Excellent. If each of you could suggest one thing you think would be helpful from a PI to support an early career researchers in research and work-life balance, could you just let us know what that would be?
I'd probably say you just want your boss to ask you how you are. Like, are you coping? Because, like, peer support is good, but you also kind of need support from your boss. And I think if they just even ask you, they need to be prepared in case you say no as well. So if they ask you, how are you, you can just answer honestly, and then they can be like, okay, and then you kind of know the situation you're in. And that's how you can get help or support.
I think discussing leave with the PhD students, so the PI should discuss leave with the PhD students. I mean, we meet ever so often to discuss experiments, discuss progress with the project, etc. I think maybe leave should be on that list, and at least in the early stages, probably the PI should be more focused off or try to enforce the student taking leave at some point in time, just to make sure that there is some breaks happening during the year. I mean, other than Christmas and the Easter vacations, etc.
Yeah, so I definitely agree that I would say that not really keep an eye on it, but yeah, encourage students to take their holidays, not to overwork. Of course, you want them to get results, but if you see that someone is in all the time, then just say, maybe it's time that you kind of take a bit of time out, because science is not everything. I mean, for some people it might be, and that's fine if you feel that way, but also it's probably good to also, I don't know, see the sun every now and then, which again, in Scotland is not that easy, but I don't know, go somewhere where there's nature. But yeah, also that in some cases that PIs are open to discuss kind of flexible working or like part-time, or kind of depending on people's situations, and that also might change with circumstances, and that's okay. And yeah, to just encourage people to come to them and be open about what's going on, what they need to work, I guess.
The thought popped into my head. An institution whereby a PI doesn't have a good work-life balance as well, I think it'd be hard to relate or expect that person help you have a good work-life balance. So I think it would be nice if the PIs could do that for you at the start of your PhD, tell you, when they see you or you come to them, you're not getting results, why don't you take a week off and then we can come back to it and try it from this angle. That would help. For an institution whereby the PI is also just, going at it every day, it's not. But that would be something that they should do.
Lead by example.
Yes, the PIs should lead by example in terms of having good work-life balance.
Well, thanks so much for your answers. So the next podcast will actually, me and Lydia will be having a chat with PIs and technical staff. So I was wondering if each one of you had any comments, suggestions, or questions about work-life balance for them.
Yeah, I would just, with my same suggestion, I would just probably advise them to be deliberate about discussing leave with their PhD students.
The one question I would like to ask the PIs is, what is the meaning of work-life balance to you? What does that look like to you? Yeah, I'd really like to hear what they have to say on that. I'd like to know what it means to them. I think that's important to help a lot of us.
Very true.
How PIs could support international students more, just because there is a lot of students. I mean, I'm just from Germany, which is not that far away, but Nigeria is a lot further.
Yeah.
The culture is very different. And just how to make people feel more at home and more kind of comfortable. And I feel like it's not really a good question, but kind of just along those lines of how we can make people feel comfortable, also to be themselves, which is, I know, really a part of the survey that we have worked on, something along those lines maybe.
I just want to know if they feel that they're actually getting support to support us. Like, because, we always talk about, why are they not helping us out? But do they actually know how to? Mental health first aid, that's a course that's given across the college by the graduate school. And a lot of staff did it. And they feel like they can, they feel like they can actually give some more peer support to the students. And, is there more things like that to staff actually feel equipped to deal with sort of difficult issues?
Thank you very much. We'll definitely report this on the next podcast. Keep your eyes peeled for the comments from the PIs and the technical staff. And yeah, I think this is our wrap up now. And just to end with a fire round. Yeah, so I'm going to ask a very quick question, and then each one of you is going to answer as quick as possible. Okay, I'll start. So, favorite food?
Pizza.
Pizza.
Quick.
It's a cultural food. It's called abacha. It's a Nigerian food.
Yeah, it's similar for me. For me, it's oil long, which is a national dish of Grenada, which means I haven't had it since 2019.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Long time.
Favorite city?
London.
Glasgow.
Dubai.
Sorry, Glasgow.
Wow, Glasgow's in the win. And favorite musician, band, or music genre?
Queens of the Stone Age.
Tom Grennan.
Michael Jackson, CeCe Winans, Gerald Albright,
Classic.
Hilton and New Breed. Sorry, I have loads.
Ed Sheeran and Shadi Adu.
Any instrument played?
I do karaoke, though, so it's my voice.
Make beats with my hands and fail miserably. No, I don't play any instrument.
All right, sax and keyboards for me.
Favorite sport?
Football.
Football.
Netflix and chill.
And chill. Basketball.
Favorite film?
Reservoir Dogs.
I would say Inception this time.
Oh, favorite film.
Yes.
There's a long list, but Titanic would be it for me.
I mean, it's the Bond trilogy. So Identity, Supremacy, and Ultimatum.
And favorite TV show?
I don't watch TV. I watch these YouTube channels, mostly cooking.
Okay.
It's a bit boring.
I would say Schitt's Creek.
Blacklist for me.
And maybe Friends, I don't know, because I keep watching it over and over.
Me too, Arvin, me too.
Okay, good. Once I'm not alone.
I know, I just finished watching it for the 2000 time, actually, last week. Favorite book?
Biology at the Cell.
Rivers of London.
Oh, come on.
Okay, seriously, Malcolm X's autobiography. Really good read.
So for me, it's Rivers of London, the series.
Harry Potter.
A House for Mr. Biswas. That's by a Caribbean author, V.S. Naipaul.
Nice. Well, it's nice to learn more about you guys. And thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for everyone who's been listening to this. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.